Hello and welcome to the Tarkus Zone. Thank you for joining me. Today we're going to be talking about the game RivenWorld, the first era. And I just got done watching their live stream that they do every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. And I really just wanted to go over the stream, some new information we received, and the current status of where the game is in its development phase. And I'm just going to try to bullet some of the topics that were discussed during the stream. Here I'm on their Steam page. You can come here, just go to your store, put in your search, put in RivenWorld. This will come up. They're still running their Kickstarter, so you can get to their Kickstarter page through their Steam link here. And they have a Discord link for their Discord. And so let's just move on to the video. And let me see here. I think this was, this was this week's video. Because here I was in the chat the whole time. I'm going to turn down the sound here a little bit. And see here if I can go back to the beginning of the stream. Okay. There we go. Whoops. Okay, this is where it really began. So it began here, and we're just going to start watching it a little bit, and I'm just going to discuss some of the key points that we went over. What are the things that I want to stress that seem to be talked about again? I'm just going to forward this a little bit here. Talk about again that when you claim land in this game, there is a mechanism that allows you to feed the land claim or the tax system so that you can continue owning that property without the world coming to gobble it up. And that's what makes this game somewhat unique, because I want to really emphasize on this point that when you go to a lot of these survival games, they tend to, people build in the world, they build in the world, and they leave the game. Somebody comes, builds in the world, builds in, they leave the game. So you got all these structures throughout the world that are basically catacombs. No one's living there. They're just sticking around until somebody takes the time to destroy them. And most people just run by them. But the problem with that is servers start to look like ghost towns. New player base can't find land that's easy to deal with, because they'll have to remove a building that will take them 4 months to chop down. So this developer said to themselves, why don't we just make this not a problem? We're needing to do server wipes, because that's what happens with other games. To get room for new players, they do a server wipe, or they create a new server, and that server is clean, and then these people that are left on this server complain that all the player base is going to the new clean server. Well, that's because that's what they call server wipe mentality, and this developer wanted to get around that, where they won't have to wipe their server ever, because if someone stops playing and then not feeding their taxes or their claim, or I called it in last video, Igor, they weren't feeding Igor to keep that property valid to that character, and time runs out, the world slowly goes back to the way it originally was when the person started building on that. So it leaves a spot for newer and fresh people to come onto the server, and the server doesn't look like a bunch of ghost towns or a bunch of ruins just everywhere. So that's really ingenious for this developer to do. I think that's going to save on a lot of headache in the future. So they're not thinking about tomorrow problem. I think they're thinking about tomorrow problems, but I think they're also thinking, what's this going to be long term? Now, I asked a few questions in the game about a few different things, chests or guild vaults. There was a topic that was brought up, maybe having an NPC in the world that's like a vault where you can deposit things with that NPC at a fee. Maybe that's the case, because I know in World of Warcraft, when you tucked your stuff away in a vault, it was protected. Nobody was going to even get at it unless they were a vault or guildie that had access to it, right? But I asked him about that. Will I be able to share my resources with my guild or my company or whatever they want to call it in this game? And the answer was yes. There'll be different permissions, or there'll be different sets of locks that you can put on the storage container. They did bring the storage container out here in a little bit. I know it's. I'm just going to bring it here forward here. There we go. Let's go here. So soon he'll bring out a storage container. So the storage containers can be built and you can place them wherever you want. Now you can see with the video that I have running, they were moving around there. Here, they're going to move around. It's a lot smoother than the last video. They're not getting the rubber banding. They're not getting the server hiccups because they're actually running on computers that can run this game now. So they're not on potato computers. And my understanding is the server is Midwest or Mideast, and they're in Texas, so they were testing the lag or the networking. My concern when they started this video is that they were going to not ping pong around or have lag early on, but as they start building the structure, in my head I'm thinking, well, the more they build, the more ping ponging they're going to get. Well, that never happened. So during the thing is I was kind of skeptic that, okay, how big is this thing going to get? Let me just, so how big is this thing going to get until we start seeing lag or ping ponging? Never happened. I mean, this thing gets pretty big and beefy. We'll watch from here a little bit. And they never started to lag. They never started to have networking issues. It seemed very smooth, and it seemed to work very well. Now, I did ask about the auto loot, what I call auto loot, meaning that when you access a tree, like you cut a tree down, the logs automatically go into your inventory. When you chip at the stones to get stones for the blocks, it automatically goes into your inventory. But there are other things in the game, like monsters, that will drop loot bags, and those I believe you have to interact with. I think they said the E button, which makes sense. So you walk up to the little loot bag, and you hit E and you take out the stuff that's in the bag. But it looks like for resource gathering, it's auto loot, or at least for some nodes, it's auto loot. I mean, the foraging, you're just foraging on the ground and you're just picking stuff up. So, you're actively having to do something. But some of the other stuff was auto loot. Like we cut the tree down, it went into the inventory. Either way, I mean, there's some games where you cut the tree down, the log's on the ground, you have to actually hit E to pick it up. Same thing with stones. Same thing when you mine something. Like if you're mining a gold node, some rocks might fall out, some gold node might fall out, and then you pick which one you want to pick up, or if you want to pick up both of them. But in this case, it looks like it just automatically end up in your inventory. Now, there's going to be backpacks in the game. There's going to be ways to carry things. There's going to be a weight system. I asked that question is, is it going to have a weight system? There will be. They're going to have carts in the game. They already developed the carts, so you'll be able to pull those carts yourself or have your horse pull the carts. So that's really nice to know. And I know I'm going fast here because I just really want to get to the point where it seems like these developers seem to understand the itch and what gamers are, trying to scratch for. And this game, it seems like it's going to have everything what people are looking for. Now, they even talked about having NPCs in the world that slep your crap for you. So I don't know how they're going to do it, but that will be amazing. If I could set up my own little fruit stand or whatever, what it is, and have an NPC, I dump my inventory, what I want to sell, to that NPC, and that NPC creates a value to it based on the in-game economy, or you place a value to it, then you sell it. Anybody can walk up to the NPC. Now, Star Wars Galaxy did that very well. There were androids that sold your stuff for you. You don't see it in many games, but it's definitely a plus for any game, especially if you're not a PvPer and you're just running during the day cycle in this game and you're collecting stuff, building stuff, making weapons, making armor, and then you just have an NPC that sells your stuff for you while you're AFK. There's a chest there that he had put on the ground. You can see it there on the side of the screen. So that would be great. Now, we talked briefly about animal husbandry. I always get that word butchered, but animal care and feeding your animals. Now, I've had all sorts of games that you need to do something with animals. And the best one I have played was Worm Online, which was great because the animals didn't die of hunger. What it was is the animals had a set 100% stat. So they had a dexterity, a strength, stamina, and those values affected how fast the horse went. So as the horse got its own hunger meter, just like the player, you as a player does, had its own hunger meter. And when that meter dropped to 90%, 10% of those base values would drop 10%. When it dropped to 80%, 20% of the base value. So eventually it would stop dropping at like 30%. So if you really were nasty to your animal and never fed it, then the core stat would be at the 30%. And when you got on the animal, it would move. It just wouldn't move very well. So what the game would allow you to do is you could hand feed the animal items in the game like apples, pumpkins, gourds. If you were able to find those in the world, you could hand feed the animal those items, and the animal would then get to the 100% mark, and certain foods like the pumpkins would give them 105% or 110%. So that you didn't have to feed them as often because you had a buffer. So there were some foods, if you made it oats and honey or whatever, it put the value at 200%. It meant that the hunger meter was at 200%. It still didn't. The base stats were at 100%, meaning it wasn't faster than any other horse at 100%. It just allowed you to feed it less often. But the other thing the game allowed you to do was put fencing up. And I can see in this game that would be easy. Just put blocks in a field, put a door on the end of it, 2 blocks up that the horses can't jump over, and then you've got them in a pen, basically. And then within that pen, they said in this game, they were thinking to allow you to plant seeds anywhere you want. Now, in Worm Online, that was the case. You could plant seeds down, pumpkin seeds, apple seeds, whatever seeds, and the world would then spawn them, and each, depending on what you were doing, had a timer. So like I think the pumpkins were like 3 hours, and 3 hours, that was like real time. So in 3 hours real time, you would come back and there would be a pumpkin, and then you would pick the pumpkin and then you'd put it in a storage box, or you would leave the pumpkin on the ground, and anytime the course got to 80% its value, it would randomly walk around the field and look down, oh, there's a pumpkin, and it would eat the pumpkin. And then you would never feed it, because the only thing you would need to do is make sure that you were planting more pumpkins. And because of the way pumpkins were, that was the best food in the game, so I'd have fields and fields of pumpkins, where there was also a way to actually have a NPC in the game plant those for you too. So the game allowed me to hire a NPC. As long as I had pumpkin seeds in a crate, I would tell them, in this, they would know to replace whatever was there. So if my check mark was pumpkins on that NPC, then it would go to wherever there was the last pumpkin and plant a seed. And then it would then stand around until it saw another open area where there was a pumpkin, and it would plant the seed. Now, if an apple tree needed to be replanted or a corn stalk needed to be, it would ignore that because that wasn't its job. So you'd have NPCs doing this for you, and I think the server capped you at so many NPCs, so you still had to manage some. But in my case, I had a bunch of horses, and I just had the pumpkin guy because the pumpkins were the best food to plant on the ground. I mean, yes, it took 3 hours to do its thing, but it just kept them all happy and content. So that was how that game did it. I mean, hand feeding was fine, or even if you have a crate where the horse, mysteriously, magically knows that you have food in the crate, and it just eats from the crate. So you have a storage unit that's got your pumpkins in it, and as long as any storage unit on your property has a pumpkin in it, the horse automatically will feed itself. I mean, that's another way you can go about doing it. So it just auto fills. But in those games, the horses never died from hunger. Now, water, there's not many games that I've played where the animals needed water, but in those cases, same kind of thing. When their water value was down, they took negatives to their top stats. And, but they were never over 100%, because when you have a mount system where you have some mounts that are faster than others, in PvP games, there's a lot of issues with that, because people get really upset if there's a huge advantage to having a faster horse. And in a lot of games that I played, those fastest horses were like winning the lottery. And then you just, there's somebody that's jumping off their horse, hitting you, jumping back on their horse, and just outrunning you. And then their friend with the same type of house would run in, hit you, and then just outrun you. So they're just basically, ping-ponging both in fast executions, getting on their horses and running away, and you never could run them down because they had a faster horse. They like won the lottery. And so if they have a horse gaps like that in this game, that can be somewhat problematic when you got your PvPers, because that's, at that point, it's just trolling. I mean, if you're just, there was a game that I used to play called Starfleet Command, and the Starfleet team had the photons, but the photons were crazy at distance. So what would happen is you would just sit there and you would shoot your photons at your opponent, and by the time that opponent got within their range, you just warped to the next space. So they were always at max range, so you were always hitting them with photons. So the game became unplayable because you never could catch up to anyone that was running a Starfleet ship, because every time you got close within your gun range, they would just warp away one screen and then just start hitting you with photons again at max range. So that's kind of what it can be problematic. So no more with Star Trek here, but let's talk a little bit more about this game. I asked about a moat system. They're talking about making the game a lot like Minecraft in the future, where you'll be able to dig, knock out land, change the land, and collect things just like Minecraft. That is down the road a while, so off the bat, no moats. But you're definitely going to have a building system, a way to claim the land, and the more area you claim, the more it's going to cost you in that taxation to feed Igor. So you got to keep that in your mind. They haven't incorporated the fighting system yet. There's that storage chest again. They haven't incorporated the fighting system. They're going to do that in a little bit. And more details on the crafting system. He was able to show how he made the wooden blocks in his inventory. He thought that timer was slow. I thought that timer was generous, to be honest with you. I mean, I'm thinking to myself, really? You think that's slow? I mean, I can understand that if you have a sawmill and you queue it in a sawmill, that process should be a little faster, but not so much that somebody can build an entire building in a few hours of game time. So I don't know what their expectations are, because if you run grindy building mechanics when it comes to the stones and the wood blocks you need to build, then houses are manageable. Houses are not being put up and down within hours of gameplay. So I don't know. I mean, to me, when I saw him queuing that and the thing was just going like this and he thought that was slow and he wanted to speed it up, I'm thinking, wow. I mean, so at that point, you're at Fortnite at that point, right? I mean, because you're just grabbing materials and then moving them quickly to another tier, what they are. And I guess if that's what they're looking for in play. But for me, when it comes to building bigger structures, I mean, you can just do it. If you can do it too quickly, then people lose fun with the game because it's just too easy. And if you make it too grindy, people lose fun with the game because it's too grindy. So you got both ends of the spectrums. I thought it was generous. I've played games where it took an actual minute to make one plank, and a wall needed 8 planks. Yeah, that's grindy. But then if you upgrade it to the sawmill made it in 30 seconds, and you could queue it. So you could just dump a bunch of logs in it, come back in a couple hours, and then you had all the planks that you needed. But there was a grind process to it. So again, it's smoother, and I guess my system is causing some of this pixelation that you're seeing because I'm running a couple things in the background. I'm actually running my crypto miner, so I probably should have shut that off. But that's why you're seeing a little of the pixelation. This was actually smooth gameplay tonight. I had no complaints on the play. Any of the ping-ponging. Like I said, once the structure got to a size where I would have thought it would have caused some ping-ponging on their characters, it didn't. Here, I think he was showing us a different material like marble. So all the materials will have their own hit point value so that it's smarter to obviously build in the highest tier you can. I think that was what the marble was. And then that would allow you to protect your items. And then the doors are also going to have their own tiers. So you'll have doors with less hit points, more hit points. So that's what's also going to be. And you can do the floor, as you can see. He's doing the floor where you can go to the sub-level. And so he's actually below ground there with that block. And then he's building on top of it. So it'd be interesting when they make the game like Minecraft, would it be just easier for me just to dig under this wall than to actually try to take the wall down? Those are the kinds of things you need to ask yourself when you make your game like Minecraft, is if it's a PvP game and someone's built this entire castle, it's only as strong as its weakest block or its weakest entry. So if I could just go to the west side of the building and dig a hole in the ground and come back up on the other side, then what was the point of the castle, right? So you got to always keep that in mind, unless there's a way to trap the entire outside or moat. I was asked about the moat, because at least if you put the moat in, if they try that nonsense, they'll drown. So that's why I asked about the moat, was how do you stop, how are you going to stop the Houdinis of this world to just dig underneath the wall and then, oh, here I am in your vault room. So those are my thoughts. I think they're doing very well. Combat's coming next update. And let me just minimize or close this window a little bit here. And I just want to scroll. I was the only one on YouTube asking questions. Asked about the PvP. PvP is going to be at night. PvP and monsters are going to be at night. I asked about fast travel and teleports. If people want to add that as an add-on, because that's the other nice thing about this game, is they're giving us a sandbox game. They're giving us the core game, and they're opening up the source code so that it's completely moddable, and people can add add-ons to it. So when I mentioned a few things, they're like, well, we can think about that, but that's if the player base wants to make an add-on to do that. The thing with teleporting in the world, it takes away a little bit about the medieval part of it. So, but I do understand the appeal to teleporting from one location, a fixed location, to another location. And this way you can move around continents, but not short distances with fast travel, because that's what the horse is for. But there are games that allow you to make a teleporter 5 feet away from each other, so you could just teleport 5 feet difference. And I've seen that happen in PvP games where they use the teleporters to move around their structure depending on who's attacking at what direction. And so instead of running to the other end of your fort to defend it, you just use one of the in-house teleporters and teleport to that teleporter that's closest. So it can get a little dirty, and then you get worlds of you get teleporters everywhere. So my always thought is, if you're going to let people put personal teleporters down or create a personal teleport, you limit it to one per claim, so that you only can have one. Or two, meaning that you only can have two teleporters that allow you to get from one claim to another claim that you might have deeper in the woods. I asked about that. Can I have more than one land claim? I was told yes, because my thinking is, if I build my castle near the ocean just for the view, and I've got some nodes, like you see them passing here. I got some nodes in another location of the world, and I built myself a little workshop or hunting cabin there, so that when I'm there, I can go and get those nodes and then hang out at that location. And then when I'm ready, I can load my cart up and then move it to my primary location, which would be by the ocean. So that's why I asked that question. Can I have multiple claims in the world where I own the area? Now, when I say own the area, this is still a PvP game. So what I'm meaning is when you're claiming your land, you're claiming it to the point where somebody can't build on top of you. And the fact being is, what you do there, you have control over. So that doesn't stop somebody from getting a war machine and knocking your castle down. It's just that, they only can do it at night, and the night and day cycle seems to be quite fast in this game. So they're not going to get much done if some of these blocks have 30, 40,000 hit points, right? So I'm not really sure how that balancing is going to work, and how you're going to protect your claim when it's at night and you don't want to deal with PvP. Do you have to make friends and have them come over to help you? Or do you have a guard that you can hire? Or do you have ballistae that you can install that are auto ballistae? They mentioned that in the game. Wouldn't it be nice if I had a ballistae or a catapult or a trebuchet? Well, it'd be nice to have at least the ballistaes on what I call an auto NPC AI, meaning that once I put that ballistae down, it will shoot or kill anything that's hostile to my territory, meaning that if a player comes up, they're not hostile. But as soon as they attack one asset that I own, they flag as hostile, and then my ballistae just run them down and, you know, shoot at them. And that makes sense to me, especially if the ballistae has an upkeep or adds to the upkeep of the claim. So let's say Tarkus has a 20 by 20, he puts a nice little small castle on it, and my upkeep is 10 gold. I'm just using this as my example. 10 gold a week to keep the world from eating it up. But then I add a ballistae, and it becomes 20 gold a week. I add a second ballistae, it becomes 40 gold a week. I add another ballistae, it becomes 100 gold a week. So it gets to a point where it costs you much, much more, depending on how much protection that you want to actually put on your property. So that's just the mechanic I'm thinking about. I've seen games that have employed that to a point where you kind of maxed out with how many ballistae you can have protecting your property, unless you've got just everybody 24/7 farming for uber mats to feed Igor. I mean, because that's one way of doing it. If you got 9 guys just going out and getting gold all day, and you got 52 ballistae on your property, I mean, that would be overkill. That would be like, well, why bother? Don't go over there. Don't go and step on a butterfly, because the ballistae will make you hostile and take you out. I mean, what's interesting is when we the other thing I never asked them was, if I own property, can somebody tame animals off my property? Because in most games, once I own a property, if a wild animal comes onto that property, it's untamable. It can be killed. Somebody can kill it, but it's not tameable because it's on my property. And so if I have a horse on my property that is belonged to me, I know in Worm, you could brand the animal. So once you branded the animal, it was yours, and it was always yours. You couldn't sell it, you couldn't give it away, that was that. But before you branded it, you could sell it or give it away. But the question being is, once I catch a horse, bring it to my property, can somebody come then sneak on my property and tame that horse again and take off with it? In Worm Online, you couldn't. If it was on claimed property, it was untamable. But once it walked off my property, somebody could tame it. So that's just some thoughts, because you can make a lucrative market in getting horses, penning them up. But if you get somebody at night sneaking onto your property and retaming them before you've done the branding process to own them, because you don't want to brand every horse, because again, if you're doing it to make money in the game, then you want the horse still be able to be transferred to someone else. Either that by allowing them to tame it, because in Worm Online, what I would do is grab the horse by the rope, and I would carry it to my property edge, and I would carry it across the property edge and then release it right there. And then the person was not on my property and they could tame it. So that's how I sold horses in that game was, you know, Tarkus, I'll give you 50 gold for this horse. I would then take the 50 gold, I'd walk the horse down to the property line, and they would tame it. And that was that. I mean, it went smooth. And in those transactions can be squirrely, because you're giving your money up front before the person takes it to a place where they can claim it. But you have to have a mechanism for that to happen, or you don't, and then people can steal horses from you. And maybe that's okay too. I don't really know. So I'm going to just button this video up to tell you that this game looks very promising. I heard a lot of things tonight that I really liked. It was check, check, check. Yes, that's exactly what the game direction should be like. And I was very impressed with what they've gotten done since the last video. And I'm super excited about seeing the next video with the new changes. Well, thank you for joining me. This has been the Tarkus Zone.